Blues 2-2 under new coach Josh Fraser. Wins against the Western Bulldogs and Port Adelaide last night. Guys, I saw the second half. I must say they just looked re-energised last night. Carlton, Patrick Cripps was back to his best. George Hewitt, terrific through the midfield. Again, you ask why he hasn't been part of this team all year. But again, you can only play the opponents that you've fixtured to come up against. And at the moment, Josh Fraser and the team are ticking all the boxes.
Yeah, they are, but I still think it's a little bit premature to be saying this is a different team, and we've turned over a new leaf under an interim coach after 2 games against the Western Bulldogs, who can't field their best side, and Port Adelaide, who are not amongst the top half.
Four.
Yep.
Let's
so
see
I think
what happens Friday night against Geelong.
That's what I think. You've got to test them against some better sides to see if that consistency comes, because we've seen good patches from them before. And as we've spoken about, they were playing great first halves and then just sort of tape it away. But it doesn't surprise me that after all the intense pressure that you've had on you as a football club under Michael Voss, that when some of that goes and some of that has gone, that you feel relief.
Right, absolutely. The shackles are released and a little bit of the weight of the world comes off your shoulders. There's been a big cloud over the club for, at least 18 months. This speculation weekly after every loss, the talk of Voss, and it does weigh down the players. There's no doubt about that. So they'd be feeling somewhat relieved the last few weeks, a bit more freedom. But as I said, let's wait and see how they perform Friday night. If they match the Cats for 4 quarters, then you could say, yeah, they're turning things around.
So even on the past 2 weeks, you don't think they've turned things around?
I think that's
you don't think they look different to how they have?
A little bit,
yeah.
but they on the form ladder for time in front under Michael Voss, I think they were third. Like, they were in front in a lot of games, so it wasn't like they were playing horrible football. They just couldn't win. So, yeah, I just need to see it for a little bit longer.
The senior coach has gone now, who was going to have a big say on whether you're going to be involved again next year. And you've got a new coach in where they don't play with that fear. And let me tell you, on every list now, there's probably 8 to 9 who won't be on the list next year, who don't like the coach. There'll be another 8 to 9 who are in and out all the time, don't like the coach. So you've got this little balance there where that sort of threat's gone in a way. But that's it. You know who thinks that way? Players who just don't have enough confidence in what they do, and whether it's their own preparation or what it is. So that's probably the freedom they've got a little bit in that now.
Yeah, and I mean,
like George Hewitt.
So 92 points they scored last night. That's their highest score for the year. It's their best defensive effort this year, keeping a team to a low score in Port Adelaide, the lowest they've kept a team to this year. I think Jack Eisen has really, even though he's not getting a heap of the ball like a Patrick Cripps or Sam Welsh, looks to reinvigorated them. I just think on a 2-week small spectrum, you go tick, and I'd be bullish if I was
because
a
they've won.
supporter. But again, yes, they have won, but it's also how
they
they've
played
won and what
they
they've
played a
got.
bottom 3 side probably
The
last
Dogs
night.
have lost 6 out of their last 7 games, right? Port Adelaide, they've been competitive, but they're not winning many games. Let's just see how they go against the Cats Friday night. Yes, they look a little bit better and players are playing with a little bit more freedom, but let's see how that stacks up against Geelong.
Tell you what, as an Essendon fan, you would take any of that.
Of course you would.
They're a different group, though. They're a different group, because I look at them and I just think, what has happened with the development of players in that group?
And that's why I'm saying you take the wins as they come. Carlton fans want to hear from you. 133 693. Do you take the wins that you've seen in the last 2 weeks? Do you agree with Laura and Richo that no, just hold off and let's see what's dished up on Friday night against the Cats? 133 693. Let's get to your calls. Joan is first on the line. G'day, Joan.
You.
Go ahead, Joan.
Why do people crucify Vossi so much? And they haven't said anything about the Essendon coach. And they haven't won a lot of games.
Well, you're right. Well, he had to pay the price. The thing about it, when you coach, it's a win-loss situation most of the time. And if it isn't, and you get support, sooner or later it will be that, Joan. So he paid the price for that.
And just hold the line, Joan, because on the other side of the break shortly, we are going to be talking about Brad Scott. I think Brad Scott's certainly been under the pump as well.
Hugely. Yeah, different list profiles for the clubs, though. I think you would expect Carlton to be travelling better, given their personnel. That's my view of it anyway.
Yes.
So you tell you what I don't like about Essendon is a lot of the young players that we said 3 years ago, gee, he's got talent, he's there. They haven't shown that to me.
And
They
also
haven't shown
what
their improvement.
both coaches inherited, because there's been a discussion around what's the club that Brad Scott walked into and the club that Michael Voss walked into.
Their president, though, Andrew Welsh, said after Gather Round that he was going to be their next premiership coach.
Yeah,
so they've got to stick to that now.
Let's keep.
You can't say that 5 weeks ago and then move on a coach.
You can.
It's been done before.
I don't think you should.
Let's stay on the Carlton theme. No doubt this man is happy with Carlton's performance at the moment. Mario, good afternoon to you.
Laura, good afternoon. Just on my way out to Barry Plant Park there at, Magoos there at Coburg. There's a bit of traffic on Bell Street, but we'll get through. There's obviously a big crowd in attendance there to watch the next premiership team in the making. But let me just say one thing. The Collingwood bloke, Josh Fraser, who was a magnificent ruckman, he watches the game from the coach's box. He can dictate everything from the coach's box. I've never seen Carlton players drop 50-metre torpedo punts or drop punts like they were doing last night. If Voss was there, they would have had to do a little chip pass to Cripps. Something's changed, and we know who's really coaching the team, Graham Wright, and that bloke from Port Adelaide, Davies. And I'll tell you one thing, let me say one thing, we're only 2 games outside the top 10. Thank God for Dwayne Russell, who introduced the top 10. If we get in, I tell you what, we could actually, 31 years after we won our last one, we could pull it off.
Oh, Mario.
Come off
I reckon
Mario.
I'd send him a slab, mate.
Are you drunk, Mario?
He drinks from the same Kool-Aid as Ethan.
Is
Social
he not
media
the only
producer.
Carlton fan singing from that hymn book at the moment, Matthew?
Gee whiz.
Our man Ethan, who does all makes you look good on Instagram.
I love
Tell
that
ya.
2 games outside the top 10 has become a new metric for how well we're doing.
I like the belief at the moment.
We're
133
very lucky
693.
Ethan uses Photoshop too.
I think Mario's been on the plonk early today.
Carlton fans, 133 693.
He's a Vino, man.
G'day, Simon.
How are you guys? I'm not a Carlton person, I'm a St Kilda, but I work with Josh Fraser at VFL level, and I don't think giving him enough kudos. He's an incredible manager of players. He's super prepared. He's just got really great footy intelligence. If Carlton don't interview him, they got rocks in their head.
He doesn't, but Simon, he's on record as saying he doesn't think
want
he's
it.
ready.
No, he's not ready.
He was on record as saying that 2 weeks ago.
Do you reckon he'll get a taste for it and want it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, if you're getting the wins, all of a sudden the way you feel about a job changes significantly.
Oh, he sounded
I'll
pretty
tell you
strong
right.
on
I'll
it.
tell you right. And this is no disrespect.
Coaching a losing group.
I know,
so you feel
I know,
that way.
Josh, and there's no disrespect to Josh now, but he said he doesn't want it, and no matter what happens this year, they cannot do that because the bloke himself has said he's not ready for it. So I don't care if he wins it. He's not going to win another 7 in a row, right? That will happen. We know that. But I agree with Simon. And what he did down at Preston, went under the Carlton, they were a rabble down there. But what he did, his organisational skills and his communication, everybody loved how he went about it. So he's got
you're
that.
putting a line through Josh Fraser, even if he won the remainder of the matches for the year, line through. No,
But he's put a line through himself.
But what if they put a team around him and all of a sudden you get that taste for it?
I remember what they put a team around Vossi last year, remember? They were going to sack Vossi, and the president come out, and how bad that was. But I'm telling you now, he won't get the job. And it's not to say he can't get it down the track at another club, but he's not ready for it. And he's already said
That'll
it.
come back to bite him.
Oh, no, I thought he
If
was...
it doesn't go well, if he did get the job, that'll come back to
think
bite
he
him
was
saying
pretty-
he didn't think he was ready. But I also think things
If
can
he
change.
did get the job.
If he did get the job, people will be like, but you said you weren't ready. Like, that stuff always comes
I
back to
just
bite
thought
him.
he
But,
was very strong in the way that he said that.
I just still think things change so quickly in football. They change so quickly. And if you're an assistant coach who aspires to be a senior coach, you've got your chance, but things are going well.
Laura, you know, let me tell you, if you do not have a passion, and he has had this doubt about him not being ready himself. If you don't have a passion, and you look at the Simpsons and all, and the Longmire, the first thing they're going to ask him, and Simpson's already given it away. All right, he said, "No way,
Yeah,
no."
but he was mentoring Michael Voss. I can understand where
yeah,
he
but
comes from.
no, hold on. He's a premiership coach who's sitting right there, seeing what's right or wrong,
And was mentoring the incumbent.
So that's why he said he doesn't want it, because he wasn't going to get it anyway. Because they can see if you're mentoring the bloke who you just sacked, you know you're not going to get the job.
See, I think that was something that Josh Fraser had in the back of his mind anyway. It's better for you to say, as a safety net, oh, no, I'm not necessarily that interested,
Cannot
because you
happen.
don't set yourself up
and
for
if
it.
Josh, look, you can't knock it back in the way, but I tell you, it's a recipe for disaster.
G'day, Michael.
We all know what the problem was. They're all being polite and respectful, saying, yes, Vossi did this and Vossi built that. Vossi was the problem. They should be hunting him down and criminally charging the guy for fraud for 4 years. It doesn't matter who coaches the club. We are going to roll the Cats next week, bump Essendon by 22 goals, and march it. Forget the 10. The 8 is in sight. The bandwagon is going to fill up. I predicted at the start of the year, Voss will be gone by round 14, and if he's still there, we'll be 1-9. I was a little bit out. We got to 1-8, and he's gone at round 9, and I'm predicting this. Mark my words, the Blues are back.
Top 8. Top 8 now.
So that's Michael, Mario, and Ethan.
This may be the problem
Same call.
down at Royal Parade. This is the problem. 2 wins, and everyone thinks they're back in the finals.
Carlton moves on Michael Voss. They get a couple of wins under Josh Fraser. Just reinvigorates the joint. You look at Essendon. The Bombers now have just 1 win in the past 365 days. That was against Melbourne in Gather Round. The Bombers have just the 1 win this season, and they've got West Coast and Carlton the next 2 weeks after they went down to the lowly Richmond to move to 18th place on Friday night. Before I get the thoughts of the panel, I want to play this audio from Channel 7 during the week. Mitch Cleary spoke with the CEO of the Essendon Football Club, Tim Roberts, and asked him about Brad Scott's future.
He's got a contract for 2027. Can you guarantee Essendon fans that he'll be there for round 1 of that existing contract?
Yeah, look, Brad is part of this strategy, right? He's totally aligned. Where I sit, absolutely Brad Scott's going to be our coach.
So you're 1-9 at the moment. If you go to 1-12, are you having a conversation around Brad's tenure?
Oh, look, I'm not into sort of speculation. Our focus at the moment is to continue to build and develop our players, and that's not going to happen overnight. So we set a strategy and we're going to stick to it.
Now, in one way, Tim Roberts, the CEO of Essendon, says Brad Scott is absolutely our coach. Yet with the following question, he refuses to rule out having a discussion about Brad Scott's future after this 3-week period, whereby Essendon plays Richmond, West Coast and Carlton. Now, if Essendon was 110% behind Brad Scott, all Tim Roberts had to come out and say there with Mitch Cleary was that, no, there will be no discussion. Brad Scott is our coach. Instead, he goes, not unequivocal.
You can't do that, though. You can't be unequivocal.
But this is my argument, Laura.
But he can't. The board.
Hold on. The president has come out and said that I believe Brad Scott will be our next premiership coach. That's not happening. And the fact is if Essendon is well and truly united behind Brad Scott, you can be unequivocal if you want to be, and he wasn't in this instance.
Well, I think you're unequivocal until you're not, and that might sound like the statement of the century, but it's one of those things where you say, oh, he's our next premiership coach, when you're at a different position in the season. And last year, they re-signed him until the end of 2027. Yep. I think it was in March, early. They made the call very, very early last year that they were going to extend Brad Scott's contract. That surprised a lot of people at the time. And I wonder now whether they envisaged that they'd be in a different place by now, a year and a bit on. I think we've seen how brutal this world can be. There are no guarantees, as particularly when you're a senior coach. I don't think there are any guarantees. Problem is whether or not you think the next coach that comes in is going to do a better job with the cattle that you have. Because this group, and you spoke about it before, Shorey, has had a lot of time to be developed. Yep. There's a lot of young players where we were saying, look at all the great young stocks that this club has, and they're not at their potential. So is that just a Brad Scott problem, or is it further than that?
Well, they surrounded Vossi with support staff. Are they going to do the same with Brad? How many times do you do that? Look, whatever it is, win and loss ratio, and like I said, that's what coaches do. And to go for a 2-year period, that if it was to continue the way it is, it's unacceptable. Because you can't see what's happening in the future. Can you see anything? You tell me. I'm just throwing up because I just think their development is nothing like all these successful sides bringing younger players through, and that's probably hard, easy to say because you're playing with better players in a lot of way. But it's more about how they're trained, how they look, how they work. I just don't think it's happening.
But there isn't development. The fact is that they were riddled by injury.
Well, that's what I'm saying, and that's my biggest issue with them.
They were riddled by injury last year, and he got a leave pass. The fact that there is just one win on the board so far this season speaks significant volumes about where
what
this
was word
club
for
is
word
at.
what Welshie said about our next? What was it?
I believe he will be Essendon's.
Well, see, I believe can be changed very quickly. Because you can still say I believed it, but I was
guess what?
wrong.
The rest of the board doesn't believe it, so he's out.
I think when he said that they were 1-4, right? Gather round was after 5 games.
Yep.
If you get to 1-12, you know that things change in football.
Yeah, so I believe can be changed very quickly.
So, in your mind, is Brad Scott out? And I believe he is. I don't see any way in which Brad Scott coaches next year. And then you move on to the Carlton argument of going, okay, is it then better to cut the cord now and at least bring something to this group, or do you let him coach out the year?
No, I think after saying that in gather round, I think you've got to go to the end of the season. I don't think you can move on.
So
Brad
if Essendon lose, so they've lost to Richmond, if they lose to West Coast and Carlton, you still keep Brad Scott at the helm until the end of the year,
I tell you what,
even if he's not the man for 2027?
Well, I'm just going by what we've heard. We've heard Brad Scott say a few weeks ago that the president and the board
are all in line,
and they understand where we're at with our development and the change of players. And then you get the president coming out saying that he's the next premiership coach. That tells me you cannot possibly move on him during this season.
Can you say to West Coast Eagles, could you tell me, just watching them yesterday, were they behind where you thought Essendon were? As in, if you say give the injuries away last year and you're going to start.
Of course they were.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, I tell you what, the way they played yesterday, the structure and how they defended the ground against Collingwood, you could see they were well coached. And you look at some of the younger players coming through now who have developed. They are a mile. And I would say it wouldn't be a surprise to me if West Coast beat Essendon.
I think the biggest signal of a group and the development is you can see the way they're playing. And you can see it with West Coast. You can see what they're doing under Andrew McQualter. And, Matthew Lloyd was quoted on here only a few days ago. He doesn't know how Essendon play. He watches them as closely as anyone. There's no real system there. You can't see any consistency around how they're playing. That's a worry.
Andrew Welsh, we're of the absolute belief that Brad will be our next premiership coach. There's no reason for us to think otherwise.
So he has to coach the rest of the year after the president has said that.
At 1-4, though, that's when you're at 1-4.
Yeah, but how can you say that and then get rid of the coach?
Not even the CEO could be unequivocal in saying, no, we won't be having a discussion if he loses the next 3.
So why would Welshie say that then and then move on to coach less than 2 months later?
To try and push the narrative away. However, it hasn't pushed the narrative away.
But you shouldn't say that if you're then going to move a coach 8 weeks later. I can't see how they could possibly.
I think that was a very, very lofty thing for Andrew Welsh to say.
I reckon I'm with Richo. I don't think they'll make it this year, even though whatever the win-loss is, unless he walks himself.
133 693. Your calls right after this on 3AW Football. Joining us here at the Marvel Stadium is the CEO of the Western Bulldogs, Ameet Baines. Ameet, lovely to see you. Thanks so much for coming by.
How are you, Shane? How are you, team?
Good.
Really well.
I was just going to ask him, you said the Sunday roast, just to test him how quick he is on his feet.
Don't have him roast someone at the club.
No, not at the club. Roast anything in football at the moment that's really driving you crazy.
Or injuries.
Yes.
Yeah, all right.
Yes.
Well, your coach came out and said something about that, so we'll see.
Well, let's start with that, Ameet, because Luke Beveridge did come out during the week. He was talking about larger list sizes. It's not just the Western Bulldogs who have been ravaged by injury at the moment. We're seeing it at Richmond. We're seeing it at Essendon. We're seeing it at a number of clubs, Collingwood as well at the moment. Are you a larger list guy, or do you kind of look at the other side of the coin and maybe a mid-season draft guy, mid-season trade guy?
Yeah, probably a little bit more the latter. Obviously, got Tasmania coming in as well, where there's going to be 40-odd players go onto a new teams list as well. So I think there's a balance in there somewhere, but clearly, some frustrations and disappointment with injuries for us, and even watching the Richmond-Essendon game Friday night was pretty brutal as well.
Is there a balance between getting that list depth right, in the case of Luke saying larger lists, that you do have more depth as opposed to a mid-season trade period where you can go out and get exactly what you need then and there, whether it's a ruckman, as is the case of the Western Bulldogs, a forward or a midfielder?
Yeah, I've traditionally been a proponent of getting the list right in the off-season, and that is an art form in itself and separates clubs. I think the challenge for this year, and obviously for us, form has wavered as well, so it's not just an injury thing, which I'm sure we'll touch on, but coming out of that Geelong game, and I think we're missing 8 of our starting 18 and most of the spine, you can't plan for that. So I think that's been part of the challenge for us, and Richmond have obviously been harder hit as another example.
What's it been like around the players and the coaches, given the stocks that you've lost. I mean, we know it happened pretty early on in the season, unfortunately, and then it sort of escalated with Sam Darcy going down, which no Bulldogs fan wanted to see. But what's it like in the locker room training at the moment?
Yeah, it's actually been remarkably, strong, the environment. Notwithstanding that, I think the major part that comes out of it is just on a personal level for teammates getting injured, and obviously Sam Darcy was the most significant one given his ACL, but players with other significant injuries, I think just the personal care element is what comes to the forefront, and the flip side is other players are getting opportunities, so there has been a bit of excitement with 5 debutants and some of the younger players getting a bit more game time as well. So the environment has stayed reasonably positive because I think it's come off the back of knowing that we were playing really strong football at the start of the year, and the season is still young, so there's an opportunity to reclaim that form.
And maybe the Dogs supporters driving into Marvel today listening, just an update on where Libba is at and where Tim English is at with their concussions?
Yeah, so Tim, we're hopeful that he might be available next week, but certainly over the next fortnight, so that's really positive. And Tom's actually dealing more with a knee injury rather than the concussion, so given his history, we were always going to be conservative with the management of the concussion, so he did get a knee arthroscope a couple of weeks ago as well, and off the back of that, he'll still be at least 3 to 4 weeks away.
But Cody Waitman?
Cody hopefully be available next week.
Huge.
And obviously wait to see where he plays. But a bit of conjecture about that. But to have someone like him even just back playing would be a significant boost. He's such a emotional barometer for the team. Brings a lot of energy and excitement to the group. So that'll be a great one if he can play.
Are you pro Tassie? Are you pro Tassie? And just the extension of that, the next 2 years, how the organisation, is it probably one of the most crucial decisions under you've been around for a while that you've had to undertake, and how to set up for Tasmania coming into the game?
Yeah, look, I am. I think the introduction of a Tasmanian team is a good thing for the competition, and for all of the reasons that obviously the pro Tassie camp advocated for, and obviously what the AFL.
Not every CEO is though, is it?
No, well, I think, and where I might share some common ground with the others is just how we navigate some of the details around that. Obviously, having 19 teams and a bye will be a challenge for the competition, and as we saw during the week, the list management rules requires a lot of strategic work, and has done for the last couple of years. Do
you think they were is it over the top with what happened? Because it looks pretty. Look, it has to be the concession. It has to be that way in a lot of ways. But has it gone a bit too far?
Oh, I think your point that I would subscribe to is you need them to be as competitive as possible from the start. And I think from a club perspective, some of the concessions they're getting, they actually have to trade away. So there is incentive for other clubs to get involved and to get some of picks like 5, 11 that are quite attractive picks in the next couple of years as well.
Ameet, Zak Butters is the hottest free agent, probably with Zach Bailey, and it's reported that the Dogs are right into him. How's that looking? Are you confident you can get him? And Geelong seem to be in the hunt as well. You're worried that they're your competition?
Yeah, look, I think the main thing is we're all waiting to hear what Zach's decision is about whether he stays in Port Adelaide or comes back to Victoria. Not sure. Not sure. He's made some really positive statements about Port, and I think what we admire about him as a player, he's very loyal. He's obviously captaining the team at the moment. So, look, we'll sit and wait, and I think like every club who's been asked the question, if he makes a decision to come back, we'd obviously be going very hard to convince him that our footy club's the right one for him.
Do you have room? I mean, the talk is this is a $2 million a year player. Is that something that the Western Bulldogs can invest in, a player like Zak Butters?
Yeah, well, I mean, he obviously hasn't said he's leaving, so don't have any idea on if he were to leave what the number would be, but we certainly have room. I think across the competition there has been an uplift in the salary cap, but we've also lost 2 or 3 highly paid senior players in the last few years, so that certainly gives us more accommodation.
You mentioned that it was not just the injuries, it was wavering in form as well. I mean, I did see an article, I didn't agree with it, but I did see an article that started to talk about Luke Beveridge and whether we needed to be concerned about him as the coach of the Western Bulldogs. Like I said, I didn't agree that it was in the same frame as some of the other football clubs like Essendon and like the change we've just seen at Carlton. At what point do you separate the injuries from the form and speaking to the coach? I mean, he's been a long-time coach. He's done very well at the football club, but do you think he deserves to be in that conversation?
Yeah, well, I think to answer the form part, I think the last sort of 3 or 4 weeks has been a bit inconsistent. We felt here on a Friday night we were really strong against Fremantle, who are obviously top of the table and went down narrowly, and then did win in Port. But last week was probably the most disappointing because the intensity wasn't at the levels that we would have liked. I think to answer the question specifically about Luke, I think what gives everyone comfort and confidence is how we started the year when we were fully fit and healthy and beating Brisbane on the road, Adelaide on the road. They're games that we haven't won in the last 5 or 6 years. So I think that vein of form and certainly the buy-in from the team, which has continued, notwithstanding some of those changes, maintains that for us. So I didn't see the article you're referring to, and there's obviously been a lot of pressure elsewhere.
Yep.
But yeah, certainly no problems from our end.
There seems to be a high injury toll, which we were talking about. I haven't seen the figures on that to what other years are yet, and probably haven't come out. Do you see something within the new rules that you might like to either pull back or interchange or numbers or something that you think as a football person might be the best? The best change in those rules to make sure that this doesn't continue to happen. I love the rules, most of them, but it just seems things are happening.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think there's always a lag in time with the assessment of things, and as our fans would expect as well, we're doing an ongoing review of our injuries. Some are just rotten luck, obviously, but we have had a couple of hamstrings here and there, so we are looking at that forensically as the season rolls on, as a combination of our medical team and high performance team, and obviously there's the whole range of factors. Then you look at all the stuff that we're doing, but also how the game's evolved, and as I said, unfortunately there is a bit of a lag associated with that. So by the time we get a compelling
figures,
answer, it's going to be a few more weeks in.
Different.
I'm curious on your take as CEO on what's been going on at the AFL with the conflicts of interest with working for betting agencies. And the reason I'm asking you is because the Western Bulldogs made a decision along with other football clubs to get out of the pokies industry. That's been something that four clubs I think are still tied to, but your club made a decision to get out of it. Have you been watching that, and do you have a view on whether there does need to be a separation there? Because I would imagine working at a football club, there's a line there for you as to whether or not your staff are tied to any betting agencies.
Yeah, I think for us it's a bit more black and white, as you say, Laura. When we exited from our gaming venues a number of years ago, in parallel we formed a strong partnership with the Responsible Gambling Foundation, the Victorian Responsible Gambling Foundation, which has now morphed into another government agency. But for us, maintaining our distance from gambling revenue and I suppose advocating for the reduction of gambling advertising has been something that we have done quite strongly as a club. So yeah, we look on keenly, and there's probably a separate discussion on the conflicts part, and I think the challenge is the perception of those things can be really strong, so we need to tread carefully, I reckon. Did
you think it was fair that Damien Hardwick had a shot at the AFL for being sponsored by Sportsbet or having a major gambling partner?
Yeah, well, I think this is where the nuance around the argument sits, because there's obviously a lot of revenue that comes into the game through those partnerships, and clubs are beneficiaries of that by virtue of the distributions that AFL makes each year. So, it is a hard one to navigate, and I think the one aspect of it that everyone agrees with is the advertising regularity and where that sits as well, and how that should be divorced from different things where children, I suppose, have access to either ads or even online when they're looking at teams and other things.
Ameet, I know you've got functions to get to. Before we let you go, mental health in our game came to the fore a few weeks ago around Elijah Hollands. It's fair to say the Bulldogs have had a number of cases when it comes to mental health, and they've all been made public. Tom Boyd, Bailey Smith, Tom Liberatore, Evan Jamara, Ugal Hagan last year. From your point of view and what you've experienced at the Western Bulldogs, do you think the AFL is doing enough in this space? Is there adequate support from the AFL to all 18 teams when it comes to mental health and getting psychologists into the clubs?
Yeah, I do, and to the point that you raised, we've had a couple of really significant examples in the last 2 to 3 years, so have lived that pretty closely. I think the reality when you're managing something that has such significance, it does take a number of different people to support the individual. And a club as well as the AFL, notwithstanding the strong networks that are in place and all the great goodwill and intent, doesn't have the capability of doing that. So it does require some external practitioners to get involved. And I think some of the challenge perhaps historically is, what's the best model for doing that and how do we best do that?
Do you think there is a spotlight on it in terms of the general public and the stigma that is still attached in some realms to mental health? We know that we have Spud's game to raise awareness of it, but and it has been canvassed previously, and I'm curious to know from you, having the experience with your players, would you like to see something like a mental health round whereby it is brought about, this education to all footy fans, whereby, what you write on Twitter, what you write on Instagram to individual players in their direct message, that is having an effect. That is why players are suffering these effects of mental health, and I guess to further educate, 30,000 fans in attendance at various grounds.
Yeah, look, I think, whether there's a round or it continues to be a couple of games, I know we do a lot of work through our community foundation in this space in both men's and women's health. I think the regularity of the messaging and the substance that sits behind it is still the most important. So the education point you raise, absolutely. I think that's a general public element. It can sometimes, at the fringes, can be a media discussion as well. But I think it's the ongoing nature of how we educate and the courage of players to talk about their struggles and some of the things that sit behind it. I think it's really important. And football, at the end of the day, is just a reflection of society. So we know from our various experiences, I'm sure you guys would in your broader workplace as well, of a lot of young men and women who are struggling with different things. The cost of living pressures that are on people now is just another element of that. So I think we just need to be better as a society with dealing with some of these issues.